Hello and welcome to the Leaders in Supply Chain podcast. I am your host, Radu Palamariu, Managing Director of Elcott Global, and it is my pleasure to have with us today Brittain. Brittain has worked with Amazon for worldwide e-commerce and cross-border expansion, Amazon Fresh and Pantry operations, as well as a consultant with Deloitte and Capgemini, and a few other global MNCs in their supply chain business units. He has hands-on experience in working and living in China, Saudi Arabia, and Europe, and has spent pretty much his whole career implementing best-in-class supply chains for leading retail, consumer, and FMCG companies globally. His grid concept for online grocery retailing was recognized in 2015 as being a top 100 idea in business, and as a former Marine, he believes that anything can be achieved regardless of the size of the challenge. He's also a constant writer on LinkedIn and pens a monthly column for several publications, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and numerous international publications. Brittain, thanks for making the time and great to have you with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's start first with your specialty. So you say about yourself that you are very much focused on bringing products to market, reimagining retail and business practicing, and also leveraging supply chain and logistics to enable growth. Tell us a little bit specifically about the reimagining retail practices piece and the space of innovation, because I think a lot of people want to and are curious about it.
Sure. Well, so the best example I think I can give is when I was with Amazon and I saw that Amazon had Amazon Fresh and Amazon was online. I really looked at that as that was actually limiting Amazon. And my argument was Amazon really needed to have a physical retail presence. Amazon should make an acquisition of a retailer. And in 2013, I actually wrote a research paper called A Beautiful Way to Save Woolworths, where I recommended to Amazon to acquire Whole Foods. And I designed a store for Amazon that includes micro-fulfillment, the removing of center store aisle items, putting those in the ceiling and in the back room, and using micro-fulfillment to fulfill those orders, and giving Amazon the ability to fulfill an online order and deliver it in 15 minutes to 30 minutes around the radius of the new store that they could build. And to Amazon's credit, they're actually building that store. So when I talk about reimagining, I'm talking about looking at a company like Amazon and saying, is this really the best they can do? Today, for example, I wrote a post on LinkedIn about Walmart. And my argument is in 2015, I actually spoke to executives from Walmart and I said to them, do not acquire jet.com. I said, I think you'd be much better off acquiring Shopify. And I think you should acquire Shopify before their IPO. And I actually thought Walmart was going to do that, but I was wrong. That did not take place. So Walmart acquired jet.com. They basically have implemented jet.com, but has it really made Walmart better? And my argument is I still believe Walmart should acquire Shopify. And I think the best way for Walmart to do that would be to divest Sam's Club, acquire Shopify, and then acquire FedEx with it, and use stock swaps and use 40-year bonds and the proceeds from the sale of divesting Sam's Club to actually make that a reality. So that's what I talk about reimagining, looking at these massive companies and saying, is this the best they can do? Or through M&A and other things, can they really reimagine what they're doing?
And I will want to ask you to dig deeper into this topic, and you're bringing forward some wide-ranging thought process in terms of how these big mammoths can become bigger and actually look at their businesses in a creative way. But before we do that, I also want to ask you the topic of the day, which is linked to the coronavirus crisis that we are experiencing. Here in Asia, where I'm sitting, it's definitely impacting everything. It's impacting supply chain, impacting logistics. We have provinces in China that are under lockdown. It also means that e-commerce as a whole is growing tremendously as a channel for people to procure goods because they don't want to go out, very simply put. What's your view on this, and how is this coronavirus crisis impacting things?
Well, really what it's doing is it's completely disrupting supply chains. It's going to start disrupting retail in the US because a lot of product is being transported from China, other places in Asia to the US. But really to me, what this virus does is point out the importance of countries and cities and states and governments doing a much better job of pre-positioning food and water and medicine and so forth. So let's look at what the reality is on the ground. People do not want to go out and be around other individuals for fear of catching a virus. So many of them are moving to using e-commerce. But e-commerce is used to having, 2 to 4% or 5% of the population ordering groceries from them and so on. So now they are completely overwhelmed. There's no food, no groceries in the store, and e-commerce is no longer a viable concept to utilize. So what this virus has done is point out the importance of supply chain, the importance of logistics, but really what it says to me is these governments need to do a much better job of being prepared and forward deploying inventory and medicine and so forth. Because when these types of situations happen, they come out of nowhere with no prior warning. And this really can get ugly in many different countries, whether it's Singapore or China or some other country. And I really think this is going to have a bigger disruptive effect than people realize. And the danger is this coronavirus at the end? Is it going to go dormant and come back? What is this thing really going to do? And I hope that the lesson learned from this is you better be prepared and much better prepared for something like this in the future.
Yes, hopefully it doesn't take too long, but indeed, I mean, as far as I can share from the reality of being here in Asia at the moment is it has gotten a lot of people panicked, and also, it comes on top of the SARS epidemic, which happened about 17 years ago or so, which left a lot of people traumatized. So there's that fear factor in terms of the population, and then the supply chain and government stockpiling and all of that has not exactly been done well, as good as it could have been. But there are a lot of efforts in the right direction. So hopefully it goes away faster rather than later. Also, I wanted to kind of ask you before we deep dive into the big and coming back to the topic of the Amazons, the Walmarts, and the reimagining retail. Before we go into that, I wanted to ask you some other case studies, because there are some other companies apart from these huge ones that have done some pretty good job around reimagining and reinventing the way they do retail. So we have Decathlon is one that I think has done a very good job as well. Can you share with us maybe some case studies apart from the Amazons and the Alibabas and the Walmart that you think have done a pretty good job in this space?
Sure. Well, one of my favorite companies I like to discuss is X5 Retail Group. They're based in Moscow. And I'm amazed at how few people have really heard of X5 Retail Group. And the reason why I say that is they are the world's largest grocery retailer by store count, around 15,100 stores, all based in Russia. And last year, I had the pleasure of spending time with them, providing them some strategy consulting. And after assessing what they're doing, and assessing their supply chain and the fact that they have 3 different formats, one of them being called Petorchka, I think they have done a really great job of their e-commerce capability, their supply chain, their store, their retail. And what I really like about them is the fact that they're wanting to push the envelope and really become very innovative. So the projects I was working with them on was leveraging autonomous vehicles, designing an entirely new way to do last mile delivery using mobile store format instead of what we would see in the United States in terms of online grocery replenishment and so forth. So I'm really keeping an eye on them. They're doing great, but I expect some really big things from them. The other company that I like is a smaller company called Picnic. And what I like about Picnic is they're an online grocery retailer, but they have really devised an interesting methodology for online grocery retailing where they're profitable. They leverage electronic vehicles to make deliveries. They're the ones who optimize the routes. They pick the time when they're going to be in certain neighborhoods, certain locations to make deliveries. And it's a new format that has really proven very popular with the consumer. And again, it's avoided a lot of the problems that I see in the US and parts of England and so forth related to last mile delivery. So I do think Picnic does a great job. Decathlon, the world's largest sporting goods retailer, they just entered the US. They're taking a very slow approach, a true crawl, walk, run. But globally, I think they've done a fabulous job of branding who they are, coming up with a new way of doing sporting goods. And the way I refer to them is they are the Aldi of sporting goods. So I'm expecting that they'll do well in the US. I frankly wouldn't be surprised to see them make an acquisition. And then, of course, you have to talk about Alibaba. I think you have to talk about Lazada. There are some really, really interesting companies doing things globally that I think are quite special.
Mm. And in terms of linking it now to the Amazon and the grocery dominance, that it seems to be starting in a whole big way for them, right? They have had that acquisition that you mentioned back in 2013. Whole Foods is now on them. They built Amazon Fresh into Amazon Prime, and now they're also having their own branded supermarkets. How do you see this playing out in the future? What do you think they'll do next?
Well, really, this is the big year for them. And when I had made my recommendation back in 2013 for Amazon to acquire Whole Foods, I wrote in that research paper and several research papers before the actual acquisition of Whole Foods in 2016 or 2017, I should say, that Amazon needs to go slow. And Amazon really is not going to have a big impact on grocery till around 2020, 2021. So this year, where they unveil their branded supermarkets, the thing that I'm really anticipating is that when Amazon unveils their new supermarkets, I'm pretty convinced, I'm pretty confident I know what the design is going to be. And I'm convinced that when they unveil that store, the majority of grocery retailers in the United States overnight become obsolete because Amazon gains nothing by having supermarkets or grocery stores like the other players. They they gain by being innovative and leading edge. And so I think they're really going to do something unique in their design. And as I stated earlier, I think they're going to pull the center store aisle items out of the store, put those in the ceiling and in the back room and use micro fulfillment to fulfill orders. I think you'll see much more focus on fresh food, fresh fruits and vegetables on the first floor of the store. And then, of course, there's Whole Foods, and Amazon is going to continue expanding Whole Foods. I will not be surprised if Amazon creates a new format for Whole Foods called Whole Foods Plus, which will give you the best of Whole Foods and organics, plus give you the ability to have branded CPG product. And then you have Amazon Fresh, you have Amazon Go, and you have Prime. And I really believe in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, what you're going to see is a lot of experimentation from Amazon. What's the optimal store? What's the optimal integration of our ecosystem for grocery? What should we do on the front end to really make it easier for customers to order from us? What's the optimal assortment? Where should we be leveraging micro fulfillment and forward deployed inventory, things like that. And once they have perfected those things, starting around 2023, 2024, that's when I think you'll see Amazon really start to accelerate. And I wrote in 2016, and I still stand behind what I wrote back then. I truly believe if Amazon puts the time, money, and effort into this, between 2027 and 2030, they'll become larger than Kroger in terms of grocery sales. And between 2030 and 2035, they'll become larger than Walmart in terms of grocery sales. So to give you an example of how much room Amazon has to move in this time, today they're about 2.2% of market share. Kroger is around 9.7% market share, and Walmart has 23% market share in groceries. So I believe between 2020 to 2035, Amazon absolutely has the potential to take over that spot from Walmart, meaning Amazon will go from 2.2% market share to around 23-24% market share by 2035. This absolutely is an incredible opportunity for Amazon, and I absolutely think they're going to go after it and win it.
And I wanted to, this popped into my mind, the question. I mean, this has pretty much been all throughout the last couple of years, it's been a retailing bloodbath. There's a bunch of companies that have closed down, much smaller companies. I think you have JCPenney, you have a lot of them struggling big time in the US. It's also here in Asia. You have Forever 21. You have a number of them. I mean, I just don't want to, we can count so many of them because they failed to properly adapt to e-commerce. They failed to properly integrate strategies. How do you also see this bloodbath continuing or not? Or, you know, I mean, obviously you have a lot of these brands. You also have I mean, I wanted to bring into the discussion the fact that Nike and IKEA, right, pulled out of Amazon. They don't want Amazon to be representing them or, you know, to be owning their customer experience. How do you see all these things also?
Well, so let's talk about the last part of the question first. So certainly Nike and IKEA, they are two very unique companies. Nike has such a powerful brand. They have such great brand recognition. They have such a good supply chain that Nike absolutely doesn't need Amazon. But the thing that doesn't change is that Nike's products will still be sold on Amazon. They'll just be sold by third-party sellers. So Nike pulling away from Amazon generated a lot of press, but it's not, I don't believe there's really that many companies that can do that. So I think Nike will do well on its own. IKEA is interesting because I never understood why IKEA on their own hasn't acquired Overstock.com, or why they haven't acquired Wayfair, and why they haven't created their own marketplace for furniture globally. And in essence, why hasn't IKEA said, we're going to become the Shopify of all things furniture? We'll be a brand, Wayfair will be a brand, the other furniture companies out there will be brands. They'll have their stores on this marketplace, but all the furniture and the distribution and so forth, we'll actually put that on our marketplace. So again, I think it makes sense for IKEA to pursue doing that. I don't believe there's a stampede of companies out there that are suddenly going to start announcing we are no longer on Amazon.com, and here's why. Amazon is the hub of online demand generation. And there is this concept that I speak about as a consultant where I say you want to sell anywhere, meaning you want to sell anywhere your customers are. So I believe you have to have a presence on Amazon. I think you absolutely have to have a presence on your own website. You need to be willing to sell your products on Walmart.com, Wish.com, Alibaba, and so forth. Sell those products anywhere you can. So I don't see how it's possible for a lot of companies to pull away from Amazon. I just don't. Amazon is growing. They are the hub of online demand generation, and I think they're going to remain that way. As far as the retail apocalypse, I absolutely believe it's true. I've written multiple articles on this topic, but here's the dirty little secret. It's necessary. In the United States especially, companies overbuilt retail. And I've read estimates as high as an additional 90,000 stores need to close globally, but with many of them in the US, in order for there to be a true balance in what does the consumer need in terms of a retail footprint. And unfortunately, boards of directors, and I do blame the boards of directors, they have done a terrible job in who they have selected to be the CEO These CEOs absolutely have ignored what's going on around them. And when we look at a company like Macy's, for example, Macy's was created in 1858. And yet, their new CEO, Jeff Jeanette, the other day was saying, we're going to come out with a new retail model to where we have relevance. Well, you've been in business since 1858. When are you really going to figure this thing out? And I think Macy's has done a terrible job in who they've appointed as CEO. J.C. Penney made a big mistake when they tried to have Ron Johnson come in and totally change the store. And many other retailers, they're folding up because they could never do anything to show how are they relevant, either through what they do in the store, their products, their assortment, or frankly, their digital. So I just absolutely think this is necessary. We've seen this in the past. And I think that we're not seeing the death of retail. We're seeing the reinvention of retail. And I believe what we're going to see coming out of this in the next 1 to 2 years, closer to 2 years, is a much more exciting and immersive and interesting retail industry that I think people are going to say, wow, this is really interesting. And as part of that, I truly believe the thing that's not being discussed enough is what augmented reality and virtual reality are also going to do in the coming years to retail. So we are really facing some incredibly interesting times for many retailers, but unfortunately, it's the end of times for several big brands out there as well.
Mm. And since you mentioned it, let's go into that topic of virtual stores, virtual reality, and that side of what's going to happen in the space in the next couple of years. Where I think you mentioned that it might even come to a point where setting foot inside the store is no longer necessary because the store doesn't exist. It's a virtual store. And that might happen as soon as 2030. Tell us a little bit about your views on that.
Well, one of the things that I'm so grateful for is when I worked for Amazon, we thought big there. We always discussed big ideas. And I was surrounded by some really capable and qualified individuals. But really, what I had access to was Jeff Bezos because he was the CEO. He was constantly messaging us and he was speaking at different times throughout the company. And Jeff Bezos always said, what customers want are speed, they want value, they want low prices. And so why is Amazon doing 1-day delivery? Speed. Why are they adding millions of SKUs on an almost weekly and monthly basis? Convenience. Why are they going into physical retail? Convenience, giving the customer things that they want. So when I looked at that and I started to doing research on the topic, I said, well, what really will be able to increase speed even more? And when I was in Russia, I was able to work with a company called Yandex. I had access to some of their people, but I actually helped a young lady start several virtual reality clubs. And it was while I was experimenting with the headsets that it really came to me that the way you increase speed is that you remove the biggest obstacle. And the biggest obstacle to speed is the physical network, the limitations of the physical infrastructure. And so I sat down and said, if all I had was virtual reality and augmented reality, and I was going to create a retail ecosystem, what would it look like? Well, when you think of it from that point of view, you don't say, well, I build stores over here and I build distribution centers over there. What you say is, well, I would create a virtual store to where a customer sitting in their living room or in their kitchen, in their car, wherever, they could put the headset on, or they could look at a TV and just wear special glasses that would give them the ability to do this. And they basically would be able to set foot inside a store, but the store is virtual. And the reason for doing that is again, there's no faster way to shop. If I don't have to physically get in a car or an Uber and travel, and I can set foot in a store using a headset, and it appears as if I'm actually in the store, and I can go down any aisle, and I can pull products from the shelf and look at it and put it in my basket, I can have that shopping experience that I may enjoy, but I'm actually shopping from a store that doesn't exist. The products on the shelf do not exist. I'm simply putting it in the basket. I'm completing the transaction. What exists will be a new type of supply chain behind the scenes where inventory is much closer to the customer. Distribution centers will look much different, but it's a much more cost-effective supply chain. It's certainly much more profitable for retailers to do this, because retailers today that have stores, they absolutely can experiment with taking the physical stores they have and turning those into distribution centers and micro fulfillment centers as they convert their customers that want to do this to leveraging augmented reality and virtual reality to shop. And when I went through this exercise and I spoke to retailers in different locations in Russia and in China and in the US, every single one of them said, yes, you could take everything I'm doing here, put into a virtual store, the customer could shop for it, and we absolutely could deliver it to them. And we could do all of that at a much cheaper price because we have greatly decreased the amount of infrastructure we need. And I am convinced, because Jeff Bezos keeps saying it, customers want more speed. They want more convenience. Well, you're not going to have magic carpets. We're not going to be having our own personal helicopters. So there's a limit to how fast we can go. AR and VR crushes all the limits. They don't exist in a virtual world. And I truly believe the future of retail by 2030 is there will be many, many consumers who shop from a virtual store.
Fascinating. Also wanted to get your views, and you've expressed a few extremely interesting posts actually on Google and on Facebook. I think specifically for Google, you did share that the fact that they believe by enabling retail, they will protect their ad revenue and actually offer an alternative to Amazon is fairly a wrong assumption. Tell us a little bit, and you also stated one line that really caught my eye when you said that Google is the biggest loser from the fact that Amazon blew out all the numbers and had 218 billion in net sales last year. How do you see this Google versus Amazon, Facebook versus Amazon competition?
Well, I was at Google in early January, and I had this discussion with several executives. And the thing that jumped out at me is, yes, they believe the way for them to protect their ad revenue is to enable retail for others. I struggle to see how that is going to be sustainable, because what Google has already done and what I've seen at other companies, when you try and enable retail for others and you try and give the consumer the best experience, what happens is artificial intelligence and machine learning start to identify what is it the customers are looking for. And it starts to direct them to just a few retailers, the retailer with the most assortment, the retailer with the best price, the retailer with the most convenience, or all three, or one of the three, or two of the three. And so when I had this discussion with Google, I said, at some point, there's complete diminishing returns here, where it doesn't make sense for any retailer to want you to enable them, because you're not directing customers to their stores, you're directing customers to other stores. And I said, why don't you instead go big in this space? Why don't you, as Google, go acquire Shopify and go acquire FedEx, and you become a retailer, plus you enable others? Or why don't you go acquire Costco and acquire Instamart or Instacart? Why don't you look at acquiring Target? Be a retailer that has a retail presence. Be the company that can leverage your technology to make it, to simplify retail for others, enable retail, but for your own customers. Be able to take those massive customers who shop at Costco or Target, the millions of customers that will be leveraging Shopify. Why not create an ecosystem where they're benefiting of Google being a retailer, Plus, they're benefiting from the fact Google is actually doing some very special things in retail, but it's more than just enabling retail. And I said, in addition, why are you not going to Netflix or Disney or going to Hulu or something like that? And instead of trying to do advertising dollars, you actually start recommending series to them or putting brands into their series, their limited series, their movies, so that when the series or the movie ends, it continually is being replayed. So it has a life of its own. And in essence, you're advertising, but you're not advertising commercials. You're advertising the brand of Google and the fact that Google now owns Shopify and Google now owns FedEx. And that becomes part of a new marketing campaign, but it's a marketing campaign using TV series and movies and so forth. So it's a different way to generate ad revenue without running commercials, because those are so easily attacked and copied by who? Amazon. And Amazon absolutely is taking ad revenue from Google. Amazon is taking first product searches, but Amazon is successful. Why? Because they're online and they're physical and they have fulfillment. And I don't see how Google is going to be able to just enable others and not have to sit there and watch as Amazon takes more and more of their business. And I believe Facebook is in a similar situation, which is why I've written that I think Facebook should take a look at acquiring Shopify or eBay, and then giving Facebook users the ability to do all the shopping they need from their Facebook user page, be able to make a purchase, and then share what they purchased with all of their contacts, all of their friends on Facebook, and leverage that enhanced social media. So now we have retail and social media integrated in a single platform. And that's why I believe we have some really interesting things that can happen in retail if Google goes down the path I stated, or Facebook, or both. And then there's Microsoft out there. There are some really interesting things. The question I have is this: are the executives at Google, Facebook, and Microsoft capable of thinking as big as Jeff Bezos? And if they're not, Amazon's just going to win this whole thing.
Hmm. And in the future, there is also the risk for, it's a risk for Amazon to be declared a monopoly. If, anyways, no matter what happens, they, by all guesses, they will continue to grow, and they, by many, by many accounts, the most boldest and big thinkers in the market. So if that happens, and at some point, the government decides to say, "Hey guys, you're a monopoly," then obviously that will be quite disruptive. You did share at some point in in one of your posts that they might want to strategically think of breaking it up and make Amazon Web Services a separate company, then make Amazon Logistics and Fulfillment a full-fledged 3PL, and then potentially acquire Target or Costco or so forth, so that they get their grocery capabilities and network spread. Tell us a little bit about these 3 points, because I think you raised a very interesting angle.
Well, the reason why I wrote about that is I actually researched the potential of Congress and the Department of Justice going after Amazon to say that they are a monopoly. And so I spoke to members of Congress, I spoke to the Department of Justice, and it was interesting. The Department of Justice really didn't care that Amazon has 4% of retail in the US and 5% globally. They told me they wouldn't care if Amazon had 50% of retail in the US and 60% globally, until Amazon actually starts getting closer to that 65 to 70% range. The way that the antitrust laws are written today, Amazon really has a lot more room to grow. But there was something interesting. I made this comment to one of the attorneys at the Department of Justice, and I said, the reason why Standard Oil was broken up is because the Supreme Court ruled they were a restraint on trade. You can't make the argument that Amazon is a restraint on trade because there's so many retailers, there's so many marketplaces. And I said, however, what if the language in the Commerce Clause was changed to necessity for trade? And that's when the discussion really became interesting, because the Department of Justice stated if the language was changed from restraint on trade to necessity for trade, because Amazon is the hub of online demand generation, you could make the argument that in order to be successful in retail, especially if you don't have physical stores, it's a necessity to use Amazon. And by that definition, they actually would be able to be declared a monopoly much easier. So when I was thinking through this, I said, well, if I'm Jeff Bezos and I'm an executive at Amazon, what should I be thinking? And that's when I went through this exercise of saying, what should we do? And I do believe that it's in Amazon's best interest to control their destiny. And so I do believe Amazon should give serious consideration to deflating any chance of them being pursued as a monopoly, especially if President Trump wins re-election. I think it's a possibility that Congress would take an action. So I can imagine that Amazon could take AWS as a separate company. They could take retail and fulfillment as a separate company. They could take logistics as a separate company. And I think it just makes sense for Amazon to look at doing that so that they break themselves up, but they do so in a way where they still try and ensure the ecosystems remain in place, the capabilities are remain in place, and that even though they're separate companies, the customer experience doesn't suffer. And that's where those thoughts came in that I put in that LinkedIn post that you referred to. But if the pressure increases on Google and Facebook, I think it's going to increase on Amazon. So I truly believe between 2020 and 2024, we'll know, is Congress serious about going after Amazon? And I won't be surprised if they are.
Hmm. And specifically on the point with building their 3PL capabilities and actually offering 3PL services to the market, and Amazon being able to do that, I think there's been quite a bit of discussion on that. We have a lot of clients from the 3PL side, from the logistics side, that are preparing for this scenario, which they probably don't like a lot. Also, we've seen FedEx and UPS. I mean, specifically FedEx, because they decided to discontinue their partnership or relationship with Amazon. They took a fairly big hit on their stock price. How do you see this possible? Because still, I mean, to become a full-fledged 3PL requires a huge network, huge assets, which Amazon, to their credit, has been building tremendously in the last couple of years. But I like you to expand a little bit on this particular point.
Well, my first role at Amazon, I worked in Amazon Global Logistics. And what I was responsible for was designing strategies for Amazon to become a global third-party logistics company. And what I focused on was how many distribution centers worldwide did Amazon need? How much in terms of transportation, full truckload, LTL, ground? What about parcel? How many parcel sortation centers and so forth? How many aircraft? And I worked with several people internally, and we designed new strategies. Ship with Amazon, for example, Amazon Global Logistics, Amazon 3PL services. And we believe, my team believed at that time, and I still am in touch with them, and we believe to this day, that no later than around 2024 to 2025, Amazon will have a network globally that will give them the ability to go public as a 3PL. And as of today, I believe the global contract logistics market is around 800 billion. And the analysis that my team and I did, we are confident, and I'm still confident, that if Amazon does go public as a 3PL, within the first 12 to 24 months, Amazon will take 12 to 20% of the global 3PL market, because there is not a 3PL out there that will have the networking capabilities that Amazon has or will have by 2025. And you have to remember, you have to take into account AWS, the retail, Amazon.com, fulfillment by Amazon, all of their facilities, but the fact that by 2025, Amazon will probably have close to 100,000 or more of their own DSP, direct service provider vehicles. They will have thousands of trailers, actually have thousands of trailers today, so the number can be in the hundreds of thousands. They are amassing this massive network and these massive number of assets. And what's happening is that Amazon's winning the retail battle. So when you are Target or you're Gap or you're some other company or you're an automotive company making auto parts, why would you not take Amazon up on their offer if they come to you and say, give us all your parcel, give us all of your auto parts, you shut down all of your facilities, we'll take all your auto parts, we'll pick them up direct from your factories, and we'll put them in our network. We will do all deliveries to your automotive dealerships, and we'll even give you the ability to go direct to your customers. So why wouldn't Advance Auto Parts or O'Reilly Auto Parts, why wouldn't John Deere or some other industrial company say, why do we need a supply chain if Amazon can do this for us? And Amazon will, on average, based on the analysis that my team and I conducted, Amazon will be able to do this at about 30% less on average than companies can do it today. And Amazon could go to, say, the Gap, for example, and say, why do you need to manage your supply chain? We'll put all of your inventory in our fulfillment centers. We'll replenish to your stores, and we'll ship product direct to your customers. And what's going to happen is that there's going to become a reality by 2025. Amazon isn't going anywhere. And if Amazon isn't broken up as a monopoly, Amazon's here to stay. And what I argue to executives is that just as you have a digital strategy, you better be thinking what's going to be your Amazon strategy by 2023 to 2024 to 2025, because if you have an opportunity to leverage Amazon as a 3PL and they can reduce your costs by 30% without minimizing your ability to compete at the store or online, why wouldn't you take Amazon up on that? And there are some executives who say, oh, we would never do that. It's easy to say that today because Amazon doesn't offer the service. I want you to stand in front of your board of directors in 2025 and say to them, I could reduce our costs by 30%, but I don't think it's smart to do that with Amazon. I'm convinced most boards of directors will fire whatever CEO says that. So I always have stated the future of Amazon is being a 3PL, not a retailer.
Mm. And I need to ask you this question. If you were a 3PL, you are DHL, Schenker, Kuehne+Nagel, XPO, whoever, right? UPS for that matter. What could they do, right? Because it's kind of they are stuck in between a rock and a hard place in some ways. They there's a certain lack of innovation or true innovation that has come up in the space. Some have done a pretty good job, but still, when you put it across, as opposed to competition from Amazon, I don't know what can they actually do.
Well, in all honesty, part of my role at Amazon was being a devil's advocate. And so what I specialized in was saying, okay, if what I just mentioned becomes a reality and Amazon is a 3PL, what are the moves that Schenker, that DHL, that FedEx, UPS, what are the things that they can do? And I never was able to come up with anything that could harm Amazon if these companies continued to operate independently. However, if these companies were willing to enter into agreements where they would truly collaborate and where they were willing to create a new platform, a new marketplace, where they're able to receive inbound shipments or inbound orders and basically volumes of orders. And instead of saying, well, this is for me only as FedEx or me as UPS or DHL, what it does is it just simply says what's optimal for us to meet this demand. And in essence, if they collaborate and create and work as a coalition, The combined UPS, FedEx, DHL, XPO, the other 3PLs out there, the ocean lines, all that, their scale would be larger than Amazon's scale. And so these companies, if they operated as a coalition, they could actually pressure Amazon, and they actually would have an ability to be price competitive with Amazon. When I reached out, however, to executives at these companies, and I said, "Hey, I'm Brittain Ladd. I work for Amazon, and I'm doing this research, and I want to walk you through something, and I want your opinion." Not one of them said, "Hey, it's a bad idea." They all said, "Hey, it's a great idea." But I said, "Then will you sign up for it?" And they said, "No." They said, "This is really tough for someone like a DHL or UPS to say, we are no longer an independent company. We are now part of a consortium or a coalition." And these companies, they generate revenue by what they provide in terms of a service. Their stock price rises and falls with their ability to generate revenue and market share. All of that would go away. And unless those companies are willing to go private, and unless there's a mechanism to take them private, this, what I outlined in terms of the coalition, would be very, very difficult to make a reality. So in all honesty, they need to start thinking about this now, instead of at 2023 or 2024. And the only other thing I think they could do is if they look for massive merger and acquisition opportunities to where they truly say, let's just merge as equals, let's make acquisitions, and let's carve out a bigger presence in Europe, the US, Asia, and so forth. So we make it much more difficult for Amazon to truly have price, a leadership role in price, to have a bigger network than we do and everything. But again, you have to have executives who are willing to think big like that and who have the courage to do that. And again, in 2013, when I was evaluating the grocery industry, I said, Amazon acquire Whole Foods. But I went to the retailer Kroger, and I said, I think Amazon should acquire Whole Foods, so why don't you acquire Whole Foods? And at the time, Kroger was actually evaluating multiple companies to acquire. And Kroger said, we don't think Amazon ever wants to own stores. And so Kroger acquired a company called Harris Teeter. When Amazon acquired Whole Foods, one of the executives I worked with in 2013 called me and said, you have no idea how much we wish we would have acquired Whole Foods, because they knew that Amazon was going to become a really significant competitor. So the challenge is, although you believe, and I believe, Amazon can become a 3PL, I'm not convinced the executives at these logistics companies believe Amazon can do that. And I think what we're going to find is, just as Kroger didn't acquire Whole Foods, a lot of these 3PL executives are going to say, I don't think it's going to be a reality. And then one day they're going to wake up and read, Amazon is now the largest global 3PL.
Yes. Well, let's see. The future is there to show us. But Brittain, has been a definitely thought-provoking and super interesting conversation. So really appreciate your thoughts, case studies, and really sharing of your views of what will happen in the future. So I'll make sure to play back this podcast every year, and we'll see what's the status of your predictions. I'm pretty sure some will come through. So many thanks. I also urge our listeners to find Brittain on LinkedIn. We will share his profile also on the podcast and on the links on our website, because I think he is somebody that you should keep in touch in terms of following his thoughts. And many thanks once again for joining us today.
It's truly been my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to go to www.elcotglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also, subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest updates first. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher, we would appreciate a kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives in supply chain or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.